Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. As a Michigan fan, I'm fired up to get into this conversation, and that is the players that are flying under the radar heading into 2025. Now, you look at how we've talked about Michigan over the last couple of months, and many of y'all know we've talked a lot about this football team. A lot of the conversation has been dominated by quarterback Bryce Underwood, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's by far the biggest storyline for this football team rolling into 2025. But because we spent so much time talking about Bryce Underwood, there are some players on this roster that I think are going to be really good in 2025, have a massive impact on this football team in 2025 that we probably haven't talked enough about. And so I wanted to have a dedicated episode highlighting some of those under the radar football players rolling into 2025. Now, the beauty of doing this in May is the only Michigan fans listening to this are the Michigan fans who live and breathe this program. And I'm sure y'all got some names to throw down in the comment section. Please let it fly. An opportunity for us to kind of call our shots in the comment section. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. To the Michigan fans, y'all have shown a ton of love to the boys. Y'all know I'm a Michigan fan. It's been a blast talking this football team. Appreciate you guys more than y'all know. Without further ado, let's get into it. I went 3 on offense. I went 3 on defense for a total of 6. Let's start with wide receiver Samaje Morgan. Number one, it was not the step we expected from Samaje Morgan in the 2024 year. I think that had to do a lot with the offense in general in the 2024 year for two different reasons. One, you just had dreadful quarterback play. So it was really hard for pass catchers like Samaje Morgan to be really productive. But number two, and probably the biggest problem with that Michigan offense in 2024 was, man, it was miserable creating space for your pass catchers. And you look at it and say the inability for Michigan to push the ball down the field in the 2024 year, there was no room underneath for these pass catchers to work with the football in their hands. And then you look at Samaje Morgan and say, what's the best skill set that this kid brings to the table? It's the juice that he has with the football in his hands. Now you're having an offense come in with Chip Lindsey, with a guy like Bryce Underwood at quarterback that has a little bit more verticality to this passing attack, and say, hey, there should be a lot more space underneath created for a guy like Samaje Morgan. This is a guy that, go back to his freshman year with Michigan in 2023. With all those playmakers that Michigan had on offense in 2023, you saw that coaching staff go out of their way to get Samaje Morgan involved with the football. I think this kid can play. I think there were some other reasons for the lack of production in the 2024 year. Really good fit in the Chip Lindsey offense. He's a wide receiver that's going to allow Bryce Underwood to have some easier throws, which I think is really important for Chip Lindsey to do. Like, look, we know that Bryce Underwood can make the high-level throws. We saw that in the spring game. We saw that from him at the high school level. You still want to give him some easy stuff to get some confidence early in the season. Like, Samaje Morgan's that guy. The quick game, just get the football into his hands and let him do the rest. I think Samaje Morgan is that kind of guy for Michigan in the wide receiver room. A lot of buzz going to Donovan McCulley, and rightfully so. It sounds like he's going to be the wide receiver one. I think Samaje Morgan plays a massive role in this wide receiver room rolling into 2025. Number two, and you really could go with either of these tight ends because I think they're both kind of flying under the radar. I'm going to go with Hogan Hansen. Again, this was a guy that, as a true freshman at the tight end position, late in the season, Michigan tried to get involved a lot. And I think he's the best pure pass catcher on this Michigan team at the tight end position. A guy that's going into year two. We didn't talk a ton about in the spring because he was a little bit banged up. There's this preconceived notion that Chip Lindsey's not going to use tight ends, and it's just false. I mean, you go back to Chip Lindsey at North Carolina with a guy like Bryson Nesbitt. I mean, Bryson Nesbitt was one of the most targeted pass catchers the last 2 years at North Carolina with Chip Lindsey calling that offense. I don't think you'll see as much 12 personnel. I think you'll see the tight ends get used a little bit differently than what we've seen in the past from Michigan, but you're still going to use these tight ends. And then you look at this Michigan roster and say, Hogan Hansen, Marlon Klein, they might be some of the more talented pass catchers on this football team. I think we're going to see a really big year from Hogan Hansen in 2025, and another one of those pass catchers that is going to be huge for Bryce. What's the best thing you can do for a young quarterback? Give him a big body that's working the middle of the field with a big catch radius. Hogan Hansen's that guy. And Hogan Hansen's sneaky, blocks his tail off, whether it's on the perimeter, whether it's in line. Number 3 on offense, give me Andrew Sprag. I'm going to continue to bang the table for Andrew Sprag until we get to 2025. I think he's the best offensive lineman on this roster. And again, what fires me up the most about Andrew Sprag, and y'all have heard me talk about this, so I'll keep it short. Andrew Sprag was not a spring enrollee last year. And he was a guy that came into this Michigan program in the summer, did not get spring practice, did not get winter conditioning, developed well during the season, got thrown out there to start against Alabama in the bowl game at right tackle as a true freshman. I thought played really well. What does this kid look like with a full winter workout? What does it look like with a full spring practice? That's what fires me up about Andrew Sprag. I get there's a lot of conversation around Evan Link. Obviously, a lot of hype around 5-star tackle Andrew Babaloa. Andrew Sprag is a very, very capable tackle for this Michigan football team in 2025. And quite frankly, one of the more important football players on this team. I mean, I know there's a lot of Michigan fans that are concerned about the offensive line rolling into 2025. And I think that's a fair concern to have. You get all Big Ten caliber play out of big Andrew Sprag, who I think he's very capable of doing so. That's going to be huge for this Michigan football team rolling into 2025. We've said it pretty much all spring. We know Bryce Underwood is physically gifted enough to win early as a freshman quarterback. I think the bigger question around this Michigan offense is what's around him. You get good offensive line play, you get good pass protection, you get a good run game. That's all Bryce Underwood needs to make it happen in 2025. Rolling into the defensive side of the football, I'm going to go to a player that we haven't talked one time about in the I guess you'd say off season here, because he hasn't been on campus yet. Nathaniel Marshall just got to campus, I believe, the other day. Outside of Bryce Underwood, I think he was the most talented freshman coming into that 2025 cycle. And that's saying something, because I love Shamari Earls. I'm a massive fan of Andrew Babaloa. I freaking love Nate Marshall. Now, I don't know how much he plays for Michigan in the 2025 year, but I know he's physically developed enough to play. I mean, he's 6'4", 265. Can give you some work at the 3-tech, can obviously work off the edge as well. Freaky athlete that is going to have to fight his way to get on the football field when you have Demo and you have a guy like TJ Guy, and then you have a guy like Cam Brand, Dominic Nichols. It's going to be difficult to get on the field, but I think he might be the edge rusher with the biggest upside on this Michigan football team. And if he can have a good fall camp, again, he's probably not going to be a 3-down edge defender for Michigan as a freshman, but can you get him involved in some pass rush specialist situations? I think there's a very good shot you can. I think he's the most talented player on this defensive line. I think he's a stud. Number 2, Jimmy Rolder. There's a lot of buzz around Cole Sullivan, and rightfully so. I've been banging the table for Cole Sullivan for the last couple of months, really for the last year, since we saw him as an early enrollee freshman in the spring game in 2024. Cole Sullivan's a stud, but I don't want to forget about Jimmy Rolder, who is a guy that's actually sneaky, played a decent amount of football for Michigan in the 2024 year. Now, why is Jimmy Rolder so important to this Michigan defense? Well, you're hearing a lot of buzz around getting creative with Jayshawn Barham, walking him up to the line of scrimmage, letting him rush off the edge, which I think is a great idea for a freak athlete like Jayshawn Barham. If you want to free Jayshawn Barham up, if you want to, so to speak, let the leash off him a little bit, you got to have another linebacker that can play. And I think right now, Jimmy Rolder's probably that third linebacker outside of Jayshawn and Ernest Hausman. And I think he's going to be asked to play a lot. We've seen Michigan rotate linebackers a decent amount over the last couple of years. I think Michigan's got an extremely deep linebacker room that not enough people are talking about, because we know our linebacker duo is elite. Ernest Hausman and Jayshawn Barham. Cycle and Jimmy Rolder, who only missed 3.3% of his tackles last year. Cycle in a guy like Cole Sullivan, get creative with how you want to use these front 7 defenders. Jimmy Rolder is going to play a role for Michigan on defense, and there's a reason that he did not transfer out of this program. He's a guy that's going into year 4. He is not going to start for Michigan because you have Jayshawn Barham and Ernest Hausman. Michigan has plans for using Jimmy Rolder in 2025. You best believe that. Number 6, Brandon Hillman. And what's so important about Brandon Hillman is I think we all saw the uh the video of Rod Moore, which shout out Rod Moore fighting back from that injury that seemed to be significantly worse than many of us thought in the first place. I guess when you look at it, so you probably don't want to count on Rod Moore playing significant snaps for Michigan, especially early in the season. Ideally, maybe he can come back for the month of November, but it doesn't look like Rod Moore is going to be on the football field in the early portions of the season, which brings me to Brandon Hillman. He's kind of the elder statesman in this room. Like, you have a couple of transfers in Tevis and TJ Metcalf coming in. You have a guy like Mason Curtis going into year 2. There are not many safeties that have been in this defense for the last couple of years that have played as much as Brandon Hillman. I think he's one kind of the heartbeat of this Michigan defense with the physicality that he brings. But I also think he's going to have to play a lot of different positions for this Michigan defense in 2025. And I think he's up for it. This is a guy that has consistently gotten better within this Michigan program. And I think year 3 in 2025 is going to be a really big year for a guy like Brandon Hillman. A lot of other names that you could throw out there, especially some of the freshmen. You talk about Shamari Earls at the boundary cornerback spot. I think he's going to have to play a decent amount. You talk about a guy like Jamar Broder at wide receiver, probably going to play a decent amount. These are my picks for, again, some of those players that, because we've spent so much time talking about some of the new faces and a guy like Bryce Underwood, these guys have slipped through the cracks, but guys I think will, number one, have to play for Michigan in 2025, and guys that I think are going to play pretty damn well. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.